A struggling single mom saved a lost girl, unaware the child's father was an alpha shifter. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character, Emily Carter. Emily learned the rhythm of survival the way some people learn music, by repetition and necessity, by counting the hours between paychecks and the miles between home and work, by measuring hope in small units like a half tank of gas or a few extra dollars left after groceries. The town sat at the edge of a wide forest where the trees leaned close to the road, their shadows stretching long in the late afternoon, and Emily knew better than to linger there, not because of superstition but because time was always tight. She lived in a modest rental with peeling paint and a porch that creaked under careful steps, raising her son alone and carrying the quiet weight of being the one who always had to make things work. People in town noticed her in passing, the way you notice a familiar face without learning the story, a struggling single mom with tired eyes and steady hands who never complained and never asked for favors. On that evening, the air smelled like wet leaves and cooling asphalt, the temperature hovering in the low 50s, and Emily's jacket wasn't quite warm enough as she finished her shift and headed toward the bus stop with a grocery bag balanced against her hip. She was already planning dinner, calculating ounces and minutes, when she heard the sound that didn't fit, a soft, uncertain cry that cut through the traffic hum and pulled her attention toward the tree line. She slowed, heart cautious but curious, and that was when she saw the little girl standing just beyond the sidewalk, shoes muddy, hair tangled, eyes wide with a fear too big for someone so small. The child couldn't have been more than 6, her thin sweater soaked through, her hands clenched as if holding on to courage. By sheer will, Emily hesitated for a single breath, the sensible one, the one that listed risks and responsibilities. Then she stepped closer anyway, lowering herself to the child's level, keeping her voice gentle and calm. The girl said her name was Lily and that she was lost, and the word landed heavy, because lost meant alone, and alone was something Emily understood too well. She wrapped her own scarf around Lily's shoulders, guided her away from the road, and walked her home mile by mile, choosing kindness without knowing why it felt so urgent. Inside the small kitchen, Emily warmed soup, found dry clothes, and sat with Lily at the table until the shaking eased, listening to a story that came in fragments and pauses, a child trying to be brave. Outside, the forest grew quiet, the kind of quiet that listens back and unseen beyond the yard. A presence watched the light in Emily's window with a focus sharpened by relief and awe. Somewhere between the steam rising from a mug and the steady sound of Lily's breathing, Emily felt the night settle, unaware that the choice she made had already reached farther than the town limits, farther than the road, into a world where protectors watched and destinies shifted. Morning arrived quietly, the way it did when you were already awake before the alarm, and Emily Carter measured the start of the day by the sound of the old heater clicking on and the light creeping through the thin curtains. She had barely slept, rising twice to check on Lily, who lay curled on the couch under a borrowed blanket, her breathing finally even, her small hand still clutching the edge as if the night might take it away. Emily moved carefully through the kitchen, setting water to boil, counting scoops of coffee grounds, grounding herself in routine, because routine was what kept panic from taking over. When Lily stirred, Emily offered a gentle smile and a bowl of oatmeal sweetened with the last spoonful of honey, watching relief soften the child's face with every bite. The practical questions followed, asked softly and patiently, a name, a last place remembered, a description of a house that seemed to blur at the edges, and each answer told Emily the same thing, that Lily had been wandering longer than she should have been, and that the adults who should have found her had not yet done so. Emily checked her phone. No missed calls, no emergency alerts, nothing to tell her that someone was coming, and the weight of that responsibility settled in her chest. She walked Lily to the bathroom to wash her hands, lent her a sweater that hung loose, and packed a small bag with an apple and a bottle of water, knowing she would have to do the right thing even if the right thing was inconvenient. Outside, Neighbors passed with quick nods, eyes flicking briefly toward the child. Curiosity mixed with judgment, and Emily felt that familiar pressure of being watched, the unspoken question of why trouble always seemed to find people like her. At the bus stop, an older woman remarked that children should know better than to wander, and Emily answered with a calm politeness she had practiced for years, refusing to let shame take root. She chose to walk instead, the 1.5 miles to the local community center, holding Lily's hand as they crossed streets and waited for signals, the cold biting at their fingers, the forest looming just beyond the road like a quiet boundary no one crossed without reason. Lily asked if Emily was angry, and Emily told her no, that sometimes getting lost was not about mistakes but about being small in a big world, and the words surprised her with how true they felt. Halfway there, Emily noticed a black SUV parked near the curb, engine off, windows dark, a detail that pricked at her awareness without offering an explanation, and when she glanced back a moment later, it was gone. She dismissed the unease and focused on Lily's steps, matching her pace, encouraging her when she tired, reminding herself that being a single mother meant doing hard things without applause. By the time they reached the center, Emily's legs ached and her shoulders felt tight, but she signed her name, gave a statement, and waited with Lily in a plastic chair, offering reassurance while the clock ticked louder than it should have. Somewhere beyond the walls, a man watched the building with restrained patience, every instinct tuned to the child inside. And though Emily could not see him or know his name, the path she had chosen was already pulling their lives closer together, one quiet, deliberate step at a time. The waiting room smelled faintly of disinfectant and old magazines, and Emily Carter kept her posture calm, because she had learned that appearing steady often mattered more than feeling steady. Lily sat beside her, legs swinging just above the floor, tracing shapes on the arm of the chair, while Emily filled the silence with quiet conversation about favorite colors and the best kinds of pancakes. A staff member passed by with a clipboard and a polite smile that did not offer answers, only time, and Emily checked the clock again, calculating how long she could stay before missing her afternoon shift, knowing she would stay anyway. When Lily asked if her father was coming, Emily answered honestly that she did not know, and then added something softer, that sometimes people are searching even when you cannot see them. That was when the air seemed to change, not dramatically, but enough for Emily to look up as the door opened, and a man stepped inside with a presence that did not ask permission to be noticed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed simply in a dark jacket and jeans, his expression controlled but intent, as if every sense was tuned to one thing. His eyes moved quickly across the room and stopped on Lily, and the relief that crossed his face was brief but unmistakable. Lily froze, then stood, her chair scraping lightly as she took a cautious step forward, recognition dawning in a way children feel before they understand. Emily rose immediately, placing herself just slightly between them, not aggressively, just protectively, her hand hovering near Lily's shoulder. The man slowed, lifting his palms in a small, respectful gesture, his voice calm and measured as he said Lily's name, the sound of it carrying a familiarity that settled the room. He introduced himself as Ethan Blackwood, explained that he had been looking for his daughter since the previous evening, and thanked Emily directly, not with flourish, but with a sincerity that landed solidly. Emily listened, asking practical questions, confirming details, watching how Lily leaned toward him without fear, and something inside her eased while another part stayed alert, because trust was built, not given. The staff verified information, paperwork was signed, and Emily felt the tension unwind in increments, each confirmation a notch lower on the scale of worry. When Lily wrapped her arms around Ethan's waist, Emily looked away for a moment, giving space to a reunion that felt earned, and when she looked back, Ethan met her eyes with an expression that held gratitude and something more observant, as if he were memorizing the woman who had stepped in when the world had not. He asked if he could take Emily for coffee to thank her properly, and Emily declined gently, explaining work and responsibilities, but she accepted a business card, folding it into her pocket with the habit of someone who rarely expected follow-through. Outside, the sky had cleared, sunlight glinting off car windows, and Emily walked Lily to the door, kneeling to straighten her sweater and remind her to listen to her father. Lily hugged Emily tightly, whispering thank you with the earnest gravity of a child who knew she had been safe, and Emily felt that warmth settle deep. As she turned to leave, Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice to say that what Emily had done mattered more than she knew. And for a second, Emily sensed something powerful held in careful restraint, a steadiness that matched the forest she had avoided. She nodded, accepting the words without understanding the full weight behind them, and walked back toward the street with tired legs and a lighter heart, unaware that Ethan watched until she disappeared from view, marking not just her face but her courage, because in his world, protectors were rare, and those who chose to protect without knowing who they stood before were never forgotten. Emily Carter returned to her day with the quiet resolve of someone who could not afford to linger on what might have been, stopping by the grocery store for milk and bread, calculating prices per ounce, and reminding herself that doing the right thing did not entitle her to anything in return. The evening light slanted low across the parking lot as she loaded her trunk, the temperature dropping into the high 40s, and she pulled her jacket tighter before driving home along the familiar route that skirted the forest without entering it. Inside her house, she moved through the small rooms with practiced efficiency, starting laundry, wiping counters, and checking homework at the kitchen table, the ordinary tasks grounding her after a day that had stretched her limits. Yet the ordinary felt altered, as if something unseen had shifted the balance of her world by a fraction she could sense but not name. When she stepped onto the porch to shake out a rug, she noticed the stillness first, the absence of the usual birdsong, the way the trees seemed to listen, and she paused, breath steady, refusing to let nerves dictate her actions. She finished the chore, locked the door, and prepared dinner, measuring cups and minutes, telling her son about school, and listening with the attention she gave to everything that mattered. Later, as the house settled and the clock ticked toward 9, Emily sorted the mail and found a neatly folded note slipped between bills, a simple message expressing gratitude and offering help if it was ever needed, signed with Ethan Blackwood's name and a phone number written clearly. She stood there longer than necessary, reading it twice, then tucked it into a drawer without calling, because her life was built on self-reliance, and accepting help had never been easy. Across town, Ethan watched the same hour pass with different calculations, standing at the edge of his territory where asphalt gave way to earth, his attention split between the safety of his child and the woman who had acted without hesitation. He had returned Lily home, listened to her recount the night with earnest detail, and felt a respect settle into something steadier than gratitude, something that recognized character the way his kind recognized strength. He did not intrude, did not approach again, choosing patience over presence, because protection did not always require being seen. As darkness deepened, a brief power outage flickered through the neighborhood, lights blinking out and back on, and Emily checked her breakers, reassuring her son with a calm voice, unaware that the momentary hush had been noticed by eyes trained to guard borders. When the lights returned, she exhaled and laughed softly at herself, poured a glass of water, and sat at the table to pay bills, aligning numbers until they made sense. The phone remained silent, the drawer closed, and Emily chose sleep when it came, trusting that tomorrow would demand her attention in ways she could meet. Outside, the forest breathed, and a quiet watch continued without spectacle or claim, because the smallest actions had already marked the path forward, and the night, satisfied for now, held its peace. The next few days settled into a pattern that felt normal on the surface, yet carried an undercurrent Emily Carter could not quite shake, as if the air itself had learned her name. She went to work, packed lunches, waited at crosswalks, and paid attention to small details like the weather dipping into the low 40s earlier than expected and the way her streetlight flickered just before dusk. Neighbors mentioned odd things in passing, a gate left open but nothing missing, a dog calmer than usual near the tree line, and Emily listened without feeding the stories, because she had learned that worry multiplied when shared. Still, she noticed how her evenings felt safer, not because she changed anything, but because something seemed to adjust around her, a quiet order settling where uncertainty had been. One afternoon, while walking home with a bag that cut into her fingers, she spotted the same black SUV 2 blocks away, parked with its nose toward the forest, and when she paused, it rolled forward and turned, disappearing without sound. Emily told herself coincidence had a way of dressing up as meaning, and she kept walking. That night, a storm moved through, rain tapping the windows in steady sheets, wind pressing leaves against the siding, and Emily checked the locks, set a pot under a drip, and read with her son until sleep came easy. The power stayed on, the house held warm, and when a branch scraped the roof, it passed without consequence, leaving only the rain to finish its song. Miles away, Ethan Blackwood stood at the boundary where trees met road, counting the minutes between lightning flashes, feeling the land settle under the storm. He did not cross into Emily's space, did not announce himself, because guardianship did not require proximity, only readiness, and readiness was his nature. He had spoken with his people, set quiet understandings, asked for watchfulness without intrusion, and the request had been met with respect because it was rare that he asked at all. When the rain slowed, he returned home, listening as Lily slept, her safety a constant measure, and he allowed himself the smallest relief knowing that the woman who had helped her slept untroubled. The following morning brought clear skies and the practical rush of a weekday, and Emily found the note again while searching for a receipt, its neat handwriting reminding her that gratitude could be deliberate. She considered calling, then chose not to, telling herself that balance mattered, that she would reach out if there was need. At the bus stop, she noticed a man arguing loudly into a phone, his frustration sharp enough to draw looks, and without thinking, she stepped slightly to block her son from the edge, an instinct she barely registered. The man left, the bus arrived, and the moment passed, yet somewhere nearby, attention sharpened and then relaxed, satisfied. That afternoon, the community center called to confirm Lily's case was closed, a formality that made Emily smile, and she hung up feeling lighter than she had in weeks. As evening fell, she watered the small plant on her windowsill, watched the streetlights blink on, and felt the ordinary return, not diminished but steadied. She did not know that lines had been drawn quietly, that watchful eyes had learned her routines only to ensure they stayed uninterrupted, and that the calm she felt was not an accident but the result of a promise kept without being spoken. The first direct crossing of their paths again came on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that usually passed without memory, and that was what made it matter. Emily Carter left work with a small paper bag tucked under her arm, the receipt folded into her pocket, her mind already sorting dinner plans by cost and time as clouds gathered low and gray. The temperature hovered around 50, the air heavy with the promise of rain, and she chose the longer sidewalk route home to avoid traffic, counting steps and watching signals change. Near the corner where the street bent toward the forest, a delivery truck stalled, blocking the crosswalk and forcing pedestrians to wait, and Emily stood with her son close, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder, patient but alert. That was when she sensed someone nearby in a way that had nothing to do with sight, a steady presence that felt deliberate rather than intrusive. Ethan Blackwood stood several feet away, dressed plainly, posture relaxed, his attention fixed not on her but on the flow of the street, as if he were simply another passerby waiting his turn. Emily recognized him by the stillness first, then by his face, and she gave a polite nod, surprised by the calm that followed instead of the awkwardness she expected. He returned the nod and spoke her name carefully, asking how she had been, whether the week had treated her fairly, and the question felt genuine rather than polite. Emily answered with honesty measured to the moment, saying she was well enough, that work was work, that her son was growing fast, and she noticed how Ethan listened without scanning or interrupting, as if this exchange mattered. The truck moved, the light changed, and they crossed together, their steps aligning briefly before diverging toward the same sidewalk. Rain began in a light mist, and Ethan held an umbrella he had not opened, offering it without comment when the drops grew heavier, and Emily hesitated only a second before accepting, sharing the small shelter because practicality had always guided her choices. They walked a short distance, speaking of simple things like weather and schedules, and Emily found herself relaxing into the conversation, aware of a steadiness in him that matched the quiet order she had felt lately. A sudden gust rattled branches overhead, leaves skittering across the pavement, and Emily tightened her grip on the umbrella handle, feeling her son lean closer. Ethan adjusted their pace, angling his body to shield them from the wind without making a show of it, and Emily noticed how naturally he did so, like someone accustomed to anticipating needs. When they reached the turn where their paths separated, Ethan stopped, thanked her again for helping Lily, and added that she was always welcome to call if she needed anything, the words carrying weight without pressure. Emily thanked him, handed back the umbrella, and watched as he stepped away, his attention returning to the street with a quiet vigilance that made sense only later. As she continued home, rain easing into a steady rhythm, Emily felt the comfort of being seen without being claimed, protected without being confined, and she did not know that Ethan waited until her door closed behind her before turning back toward the forest, satisfied that the brief convergence had changed nothing that needed guarding. In the space between them, something settled into place, not a declaration or a promise, but an understanding that would shape what came next. The reveal did not arrive with spectacle or raised voices, but with a quiet inevitability that felt truer for the way it unfolded. A week later, the town hosted its seasonal fall gathering at the community field, rows of tents set up with baked goods, school fundraisers, and a small stage where a local band played familiar songs. Emily Carter brought her son after work, budgeting a few dollars for cider and a slice of pie, grateful for an evening that promised normalcy. The air hovered around 55 degrees, crisp and clean, the kind that made conversations linger, and Emily noticed how people clustered closer than usual as dusk approached. She saw Ethan Blackwood near the edge of the field, Lily beside him, both blending easily into the crowd, and she offered a wave that he returned with a nod, content to keep distance. As the lights strung between poles flickered on, a ripple of attention moved through the gathering, subtle but coordinated, as if an unseen cue had been given. Emily felt it then, the same awareness she had felt before, only clearer, like the difference between a shadow and a shape. Conversations softened, movements aligned, and a respectful space formed around Ethan without anyone naming why. A volunteer approached him with a question about parking, and the exchange ended with quick agreement and efficient action, people responding not out of fear but recognition. Emily watched, curiosity replacing caution, as she noticed how even the most opinionated neighbors adjusted their tone, how the band paused briefly until Ethan passed, then resumed without comment. Lily ran to Emily with a grin, tugging her hand to show a painted pumpkin, and Emily knelt, praising the colors, unaware that eyes followed the interaction with careful interest. When Emily stood, Ethan was closer, thanking her for coming, and for a moment the noise seemed to fall away. He did not declare anything. He simply said that some people had asked him to help organize safety for the event because the woods pressed close and the night was busy. Emily smiled and said it made sense, and as she spoke, she noticed the forest edge grow still, the way animals quiet when a leader passes through. A child tripped nearby, and before Emily could move, two adults stepped in smoothly, steadying the child and returning him to his parent, the coordination effortless. Emily felt a realization settle, not as shock, but as clarity, and she looked at Ethan with new understanding, seeing the restraint beneath his calm, the authority held in reserve. He met her gaze, reading the shift, and did not deny it when she asked quietly if he was more than he seemed. He answered with honesty shaped by respect, saying that he belonged to an old community tied to the forest, that leadership came with responsibilities, and that he preferred to keep peace rather than draw lines. Emily absorbed the words, measuring them against what she had seen, the protection offered without claim, the order maintained without command, and she nodded, accepting truth without needing details. As the band finished its set and applause rose, Ethan thanked Emily again, this time with a gravity that acknowledged the choice she had made on that rainy night. Lily hugged Emily once more before being called away, and Emily felt the rightness of it, the sense that her kindness had met something ancient and careful. The gathering ended without incident, lights dimming, people dispersing with contented fatigue, and Emily walked home under a sky pricked with early stars, knowing now that the calm around her was not coincidence. Behind her, at the edge of town, Ethan watched the paths clear and the night settle, revealing himself only as much as was necessary, certain that Emily understood enough, and that understanding, once given, could not be taken back. Understanding did not demand immediate action, but it did reshape the days that followed, giving them a steadier frame. Emily Carter noticed how invitations appeared without pressure, a school meeting scheduled at a better hour, a repair handled promptly, small courtesies that respected her independence while easing the load she carried. She accepted what fit and declined what did not, and in that balance she felt more herself than she had in years. Ethan Blackwood remained present without crowding, greeting her when paths crossed, asking after her son, listening more than speaking, and when he did speak, it was with clarity that never promised what he could not keep. One evening, as the town council gathered to discuss lighting along the road near the forest, Emily attended because the issue affected her walk home, and she took a seat near the back, prepared to listen. The room filled with familiar faces, voices rising and falling in predictable patterns, until Ethan arrived quietly and took a place to the side, not at the table, not claiming authority, simply there. The discussion shifted almost immediately, ideas aligning, concerns addressed with unusual efficiency, and Emily watched as the room found consensus without realizing why. When a question arose about safety during winter storms, Ethan spoke briefly, outlining a plan that respected budgets and neighbors alike, and the nods that followed were unanimous. Emily felt a warmth of recognition, not pride by association, but respect for leadership exercised gently. Afterward, outside beneath streetlights humming to life, Ethan approached her and asked if she would walk a few blocks together, and she agreed, appreciating the simplicity of the request. They spoke of ordinary things at first, then of responsibility, and Emily said she valued transparency because it allowed trust to grow at a human pace. Ethan answered that trust was strongest when earned through consistency, not spectacle, and that his community believed protection was proven by restraint. As they walked, a loose dog darted across the sidewalk, startling passers-by, and before Emily could react, Ethan positioned himself calmly, voice low and steady, guiding the dog away without drama, returning it to a grateful owner who thanked him with relief. The moment passed, but Emily felt its meaning settle, a clear line drawn between power and care. Near her street, Ethan stopped and addressed her directly, saying that what she had done for Lily had set a standard he intended to honor, that she would always have safe passage and respect within his reach, not as obligation, but as recognition. Emily considered the words, weighing them against her values, and she accepted with a nod, not surrendering autonomy, but acknowledging partnership. The following weekend, at a small gathering hosted by the school, Emily saw the understanding made visible. Teachers greeted her by name. Neighbors offered help without expectation, and when she glanced toward the trees, she felt no unease. Lily ran to her with news of a spelling test, and Emily laughed, kneeling to listen, while Ethan watched from a distance that conveyed trust. As the afternoon wound down, Emily realized that recognition did not require ceremony, only alignment between actions and intent. She walked home content, knowing that protection had been extended without condition, and that in accepting it, she had not lost herself, but found a steadier ground to stand on, one where kindness had been seen, honored, and answered in kind. The season turned quietly, leaves thinning on branches, mornings sharpening into the low 40s, and Emily Carter found that her life felt larger without becoming louder. She walked the same streets, paid the same bills, and packed the same lunches, yet the space around her seemed to breathe with her rather than press in. One early evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and painted the sky in soft copper, Ethan Blackwood asked if she would join him and Lily for a short walk along the paved trail that bordered the field, a public place, well-lit, ordinary, and Emily agreed because trust had been built in small, careful measures. Lily ran ahead, stopping to point out squirrels and the first lights flickering on in nearby houses, and Emily matched her pace with an ease she had not known she was missing. Ethan spoke of stewardship rather than power, of choosing restraint when command would be easier, and Emily spoke of resilience learned through repetition, of finding dignity in doing what needed to be done day after day. When they paused near a bench, Lily climbed up and patted the space between them, announcing that this was a good spot, and Emily laughed, sitting without hesitation. Ethan looked at Emily then, not with claim but with clarity, saying that families were formed by actions before names, that Lily had felt safe with her because Emily had chosen compassion without calculation, and that such choices echoed farther than most people imagined. Emily listened, recognizing the truth in the words without feeling bound by them. And she answered that safety mattered because it allowed people to grow into who they already were. As dusk settled, the field lights warmed the path, and the sounds of town carried softly. Cars passing, doors closing, lives continuing. A breeze stirred the trees, and Emily felt the steadiness she had sensed weeks ago now fully present, not imposed but shared. Lily leaned against her, sleepy and content, and murmured that she liked walking together, and Emily brushed hair from the child's face, understanding that love could be careful and still be real. Ethan stood and offered a hand to Lily, then to Emily, not to lead but to accompany, and she accepted, rising with the confidence of someone who knew her footing. They walked back toward the lot, parting at the curb with easy smiles, plans left open rather than promised, because what mattered had already been shown. Later that night, Emily tucked her son into bed, paid one last bill, and stood by the window, watching the street settle into quiet. She did not feel watched. She felt regarded, the difference clear and welcome. Somewhere near the forest edge, Ethan paused and listened, satisfied that the balance held, that the town slept easily, that the woman who had stepped forward without knowing why had been met with respect rather than demand. Emily turned off the light and rested, knowing that destiny did not arrive with thunder, but with recognition, and that the strength she had always carried had finally been answered by strength that knew how to be gentle, leaving the future open, steady, and bright.